First class was supposed to be quiet, polite, civilized. That's what the white woman kept reminding herself as she adjusted her silk scarf and scanned the cabin like she owned it. Then her eyes landed on the twins. Two black boys, same face, same curious eyes, sitting across the aisle in seats that cost more than most people's rent. Their legs barely reached the edge, their voices were low, their hands were folded, they weren't laughing, they weren't running, they weren't doing anything wrong. And somehow that made it worse. The woman's jaw tightened. She leaned toward the aisle, watching them with a stare that wasn't curiosity, it was judgment. The kind that decides guilt before facts. The kind that whispers asterisk you don't belong here without saying a word. One twin shifted in his seat, accidentally brushing the armrest. That was all it took. "Excuse me," the woman snapped loud enough for half of first class to hear. "Control your children." The cabin froze. The twins looked at each other, confused. One swallowed hard, eyes darting toward their mother, a black woman sitting calmly beside them, posture straight, face unreadable. "I didn't touch you," the boy said softly. But the woman was already standing. She stepped into the aisle, pointing, accusing, her voice sharp with entitlement. She claimed they invaded her space, claimed they were disruptive, claimed she felt unsafe asterisk. Then she reached out. Her hand closed around one twin's wrist, not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough to assert power. Gasps rippled through the cabin. No one moved. The boy froze, not because he was guilty, but because he had been taught too early in life that reacting could make things worse. The mother stood slowly. Not yelling, not shaking, just standing. "Remove your hand from my child," she said quietly. The woman laughed, dismissive, confident, untouchable. She had no idea who she was dealing with. No idea what rules she had just broken. No idea that this mother didn't just raise her voice, she raised standards. And what she didn't know would ground the entire flight. The twins, mother had learned long ago how to read rooms before rooms decided how to read her. She noticed everything the moment she stepped onto the plane, the subtle pauses, the sideways glances, the way some smiles lingered too long while others never arrived at all. First class was designed to feel separate from the rest of the world, insulated by leather seats and soft lighting, but she knew better. Spaces like this didn't erase history. They only hid it under polish. Her name was Nia Carter. She moved with quiet intention, guiding her sons down the aisle, one hand resting lightly on each of their shoulders. The twins, Malik and Miles, walked in sync without trying, their sneakers scuffed from playgrounds and school hallways, not airport lounges. They were 8 years old, bright-eyed, observant, already fluent in reading adults, moods even when adults thought children weren't watching. "Remember," Nia said softly as they reached their row, "inside voices okay." They nodded instantly, not because they were unruly, but because they understood what was expected of them in places like this. Nia helped them settle into their seats, buckling their belts herself even though they could do it alone. It wasn't about ability. It was about grounding them, about reassurance, about letting them know she was right there. This flight mattered. They weren't traveling for luxury or status. They were on their way to something important, a family milestone tied to loss and responsibility, something Nia hadn't fully explained to her sons yet. She believed children deserved honesty, but also timing. And right now, she wanted peace. Peace, however, had a way of slipping away from her in public spaces. Across the aisle sat the woman. Perfect posture, expensive clothes, the kind of confidence that came from never having to question whether she belonged. She noticed Nia the way people notice a stain on something pristine, quick, irritated, and judgmental. Nia caught the look and looked away. She had learned the cost of eye contact. The twins were quiet, flipping through safety cards, whispering observations about clouds they couldn't see yet. Malik asked if planes ever got tired. Miles wondered who decided which seat was first class. Nia smiled at their curiosity, answering softly, encouraging gently. But the air shifted anyway. The woman across the aisle sighed loudly. Once, then again. Her eyes flicked toward the boys every few seconds, as if waiting for them to confirm a belief she already held. Nia felt it in her chest, that familiar tightening. The instinct to shrink, to preemptively apologize for taking up space she had paid for like everyone else. She didn't. Instead, she straightened her spine. Nia wasn't new to this. She had spent her life navigating institutions that smiled while doubting her competence. She had earned credentials people assumed she borrowed. She had learned to speak calmly while being provoked, to document instead of explode, to protect instead of perform. Most importantly, she had learned that her sons were always watching. Malik was the sensitive one, quick to internalize, quicker to blame himself. Miles was bolder but still cautious, aware that confidence in black boys was often misread as defiance. Nia carried that knowledge like a second heartbeat. She watched as the woman leaned toward a flight attendant, whispering something while nodding toward the twins. The attendant's smile tightened, professional, neutral, empty. No one said anything out loud. That was the danger. Silence didn't mean peace, it meant permission. Nia felt anger rise, slow and controlled. Not for herself, she had endured worse, but for the lesson being written in real time for her children, that their existence could make others uncomfortable no matter how small they tried to be. She reached for their hands, squeezing once. "You okay?" she asked quietly. "Yes, ma'am," they replied in unison. She wished that answer didn't break her heart. As the plane prepared for takeoff, the cabin buzzed with routine announcements and practiced smiles. But underneath it all, something sharp waited to surface. A line had already been drawn, not by the children, not by the mother, but by someone who believed comfort was something only she deserved. Nia looked straight ahead, steady, composed. She didn't know exactly how the moment would come. She only knew one thing for certain. If anyone crossed her sons, she would not let silence teach them the wrong lesson. The seatbelt sign clicked on, and with it came a strange stillness, the kind that settles right before something goes wrong. Malik shifted in his seat, trying to sit up straighter the way his mother had taught him. His elbow brushed the shared armrest. Barely. The kind of movement no one would notice unless they were already looking for a reason. The woman across the aisle noticed. She inhaled sharply, like someone offended on principle. "Unbelievable," she muttered, just loud enough to be heard. Nia's eyes lifted slowly, not in challenge but in awareness. She felt the temperature change. Years of experience told her this wasn't about space or manners. It was about permission, who was allowed to exist comfortably and who was expected to stay invisible. Miles leaned closer to his brother. "Did we do something?" he whispered. "No," Malik whispered back, but doubt crept into his voice. The woman shifted in her seat, crossed her legs sharply, then uncrossed them. She looked around, almost searching for agreement. When she found none, her irritation sharpened. "Excuse me," she said suddenly, her voice cutting through the cabin like a blade. "Are you going to keep letting them fidget like that?" Several heads turned. Nia remained seated, calm, measured. "They're sitting," she replied evenly, "just like everyone else." The woman scoffed. "This is first class, people pay for peace up here." The implication hung heavy in the air. Malik's ears burned. He stared straight ahead, hands clenched in his lap. Miles stiffened, his shoulders rising defensively. Nia felt it then, that familiar pull between protection and restraint. She chose her words carefully. "We paid too," she said, "and my children are being respectful." The woman smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Well, it doesn't feel respectful," she replied. "Some of us don't feel comfortable." That word again. Uncomfortable. Nia noticed the flight attendant hovering nearby, pretending to adjust an overhead bin that didn't need adjusting. Listening, watching, waiting to see who would be appeased. The woman leaned forward, eyes locked on Malik. "You just touched my armrest," she said sharply. "Don't lie." "I didn't mean to," Malik said softly. "I'm sorry." The apology came automatically, too automatically. Nia's jaw tightened. "He doesn't need to apologize," she said. "He didn't do anything wrong." That's when the woman stood up. The movement was abrupt, aggressive. Her knees bumped the seat in front of her as she stepped into the aisle, towering over the twins. The closeness was intentional, intimidating. "Listen," she said, pointing a finger toward Malik's chest. "Children like you need to learn boundaries." Nia stood. Not fast, not slow, just deliberate. "Do not speak to my son that way," she said. The cabin went silent. The woman laughed, a short, dismissive sound. Oh, please, if you could control them, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Then she did something no one expected her to do out loud. She reached down, her hand wrapped around Malik's wrist. It wasn't violent in the way movies show violence. There was no dramatic struggle, no screaming. It was worse. It was confident, possessive, a stranger's grip asserting authority over a child who had been taught not to react. Malik froze. His breath caught in his throat. His eyes widened not in pain but in shock. He looked at his mother, searching for instruction, for safety, for permission to exist. Miles jumped to his feet. Don't touch him. Gasps rippled through first class. Nia's voice dropped, low, steady, dangerous in its calm. Remove your hand from my child. The woman didn't. Instead, she tightened her grip just enough to prove she could. I'm trying to teach him respect, she said, since you clearly haven't. That was the moment. The moment something broke. Nia felt heat flood her chest, but she kept her voice even. Years of discipline held her steady. You are assaulting a minor, she said clearly. Let go now. A few passengers shifted uncomfortably. One man looked away. Another woman clutched her purse tighter. No one stepped in. The flight attendant finally moved closer. Ma'am, she said to Nia, her tone cautious, rehearsed. Let's all try to calm down. Nia turned slowly. Calm down, she repeated. This woman has her hands on my son. The attendant glanced at the woman, then back at Nia. We don't want to escalate the situation. Escalate? As if Malik's wrist wasn't already being held hostage. The woman smirked. See, even they agree, your kids are the problem. Miles' eyes filled with tears, angry ones. We didn't do anything. That's when the woman finally let go. Malik pulled his arm back quickly, rubbing his wrist, shoulders shaking. He didn't cry. He had learned not to. Nia knelt immediately, bringing herself to eye level with her son's. Are you hurt? She asked gently. He shook his head, though his hands trembled. Nia stood again. Something had shifted inside her. This was no longer about discomfort. This was no longer about silence. The woman crossed her arms. I want them moved, she said, or I'm filing a complaint. Nia met her eyes, unflinching. Good, she said quietly, so am I. And for the first time since boarding, the woman's smile flickered. She had no idea what she had just set in motion. The moment stretched longer than it should have. Nia stood there, shoulders squared, her sons behind her like she was a wall between them and the world. Malik's fingers still circled his wrist, rubbing gently, as if trying to erase the memory of a stranger's grip. Miles' breathing was uneven, not loud, not disruptive, but sharp with contained emotion. The woman exhaled loudly, irritated that the attention hadn't resolved in her favor. I don't understand why this is such a big deal, she said, addressing the flight attendant now. I felt threatened. I reacted. That's human. Threatened by an 8-year-old sitting in his seat. Nia didn't interrupt. She watched. She listened. She let the woman speak long enough to reveal herself. The flight attendant nodded slowly, the way people do when they want to end a situation quickly rather than correctly. Ma'am, she said to Nia, perhaps we can reseat your children to avoid further conflict. Nia blinked once. Why, she asked. The attendant hesitated. For everyone's comfort. There it was again. Comfort. Nia felt something cold settle in her chest. Not fear, not anger, clarity. My children were seated, quiet, and assaulted, she said, each word deliberate. You're asking the wrong family to move. The woman laughed again, louder this time. Unbelievable, always playing the victim. Miles flinched at the words. Nia turned slightly, placing a hand behind her without looking, a silent signal to stay close. Her voice never rose. Do not speak about my children, she said. Speak to me. The woman rolled her eyes. Fine, then you should know I fly all the time. I know how these things work. If someone makes a scene, they get removed. Nia met her gaze. You already made the scene. A few passengers shifted. One man cleared his throat, then stopped himself. A woman, too, rose back, stared openly now, discomfort etched across her face. The flight attendant glanced around, realizing, perhaps too late, that the cabin was no longer neutral territory. People had seen, People had heard. "Let me get the purser," she said finally, stepping away. The woman crossed her arms in triumph, as if escalation was proof she was right. Malik tugged lightly at Nia's sleeve. "Mom," he whispered, "are we in trouble?" Nia knelt again, this time slower, making sure everyone could see her care. "No," she said softly. "You did nothing wrong, and I need you to remember that." She looked at both of them, holding their faces gently in her hands. "No matter what happens next." They nodded, trusting her completely. That trust burned brighter than any anger she felt. When Nia stood, she noticed something else. Several passengers were watching her now, not with suspicion but with curiosity, with something close to respect. The purser arrived moments later, professional smile fixed, eyes scanning the scene. "I'm told there's been a disturbance," he said. "Yes," the woman replied immediately. "These children were invading my space, and their mother became aggressive when I tried to correct them." Nia didn't react, she waited. The purser turned to her. "Ma'am." Nia spoke calmly. "This passenger falsely accused my son, physically grabbed his wrist, and continued to escalate despite being asked to stop. Multiple witnesses saw it." The purser paused. "Is that accurate?" Silence. Then unexpectedly, a voice from across the aisle spoke up. "I saw it," a middle-aged man said quietly. "The kids weren't doing anything." Another passenger nodded. "She touched the child," a woman added. "It wasn't okay." The woman's posture stiffened. "That's not what happened." The purser raised a hand. "Ma'am," he said to her, "please lower your voice." That was the first time anyone had said that to her. Her confidence cracked just slightly. "I pay a lot of money to fly first class," she snapped. "I expect standards." Nia didn't smile when she replied. "So do I." The purser took a breath. "I'm going to need everyone seated while I review this." The woman sat reluctantly. Nia followed, but she did not relax. As the purser stepped away, the woman leaned over again, lowering her voice like a threat. "You think you won," she said. "People like you always push too far." Nia turned slowly. "No," she said. "People like you are just used to pushing without consequences." The woman scoffed, but her eyes darted, calculating, uncertain. Minutes passed. The plane remained at the gate. Whispers spread through the cabin like static. Malik rested his head against Nia's arm. Miles stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. Then the purser returned. "Ma'am," he said to the woman, "we've received multiple reports that your behavior violated our conduct policy." The woman's face flushed. "This is ridiculous." And he continued, "Physical contact with another passenger, especially a minor, is taken very seriously." Nia felt her sons tense beside her. The purser turned to Nia. "Ma'am, may I ask, are you requesting to file a formal complaint?" Nia didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said, "and I expect it to be documented accurately." The woman laughed sharply. "Go ahead, I know how this ends." Nia looked at her, steady and composed. "So do I." The purser nodded. "In that case," he said, "the captain has been informed. We will not be departing until this is resolved." A murmur swept through the cabin. The woman's eyes widened. "What?" "For safety and protocol," he continued, "the flight will remain grounded." For the first time since boarding, the woman looked afraid. Nia didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice. She simply sat there, her sons pressed safely against her sides, as the weight of accountability finally shifted. This wasn't about revenge. This was about truth meeting power. And the flight wasn't going anywhere until it did. The cabin felt different once the words "grounded flight" settled into the air. It wasn't loud. There were no raised voices, no chaos. Just a subtle shift, like everyone suddenly realized they were no longer spectators to a private disagreement, but witnesses to something that mattered. Nia felt it immediately. The way bodies adjusted in seats. The way eyes stopped avoiding her and started lingering. The way silence now carried weight instead of indifference. Malik leaned into her side, small fingers curling into the fabric of her sleeve. Miles sat rigid, chin lifted, trying to be brave in a way that looked older than 8. Nia wrapped an arm around both of them, grounding herself as much as them. Across the aisle, the woman stared straight ahead, jaw clenched so tight it trembled. "This is absurd." she muttered, loud enough to be heard but not bold enough to challenge directly. Holding an entire plane hostage over a misunderstanding. Nia didn't respond. She had learned long ago that people who weaponized words like misunderstanding were rarely interested in understanding at all. The purser moved down the aisle, speaking quietly to other crew members, taking notes, listening. Each step he took felt like another inch of pressure closing in on the woman's certainty. A flight attendant approached Nia cautiously. "Ma'am," she said, voice softer now, "can I get your children some water?" Nia nodded, "Thank you." It wasn't an apology, but it was a shift. The woman noticed too. She turned in her seat, eyes narrowing. "Really?" she scoffed. "You're rewarding bad behavior now." The attendant stiffened. "Ma'am, please." The woman threw her hands up. Unbelievable. Nia finally spoke, not to argue, not to defend, but to correct. "My children are not a lesson," she said evenly. "They're passengers." The woman laughed sharply. "You people always make everything about race." That did it. The word people landed heavy, unmistakable, impossible to walk back. A hush fell over first class. Nia inhaled slowly through her nose. She felt the old instinct, the one that urged restraint at all costs, rise up, familiar and persuasive. But she also felt something else now. "Resolve." "Don't," she said quietly. "Don't what?" the woman snapped. "Don't pretend you don't know exactly what you're saying," Nia replied. The woman leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I know exactly what I'm saying. I don't feel safe sitting next to them." Nia held her gaze. "Safety isn't about your feelings, it's about behavior, and yours crossed a line." The woman opened her mouth to respond, but the purser returned before she could. "Ma'am," he said to the woman, "we need to ask you a few more questions." She rolled her eyes dramatically. "Of course you do." He gestured toward the galley, "Privately." Her head snapped up. "I'm not going anywhere." "This isn't optional," he said calmly. The woman stood abruptly, knocking her knee against the seat. She glanced around, searching for support, for agreement, for someone to validate her outrage. She found none. As she followed the purser away, murmurs rippled through the cabin. Some passengers leaned toward one another, whispering. Others stared straight ahead, suddenly fascinated by tray tables and seat pockets. Nia exhaled slowly. Miles tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, are we still flying?" "Yes," she said gently, "just not yet." Malik frowned. "Did we do something bad?" Her heart cracked at the question. "No," she said firmly. "You did exactly what you were supposed to do." "What's that?" Miles asked. She paused, choosing her words carefully. "You stayed kind, you stayed calm, and you told the truth." They nodded, absorbing it. Minutes stretched. The plane remained still, tethered to the gate by more than cables, tethered by accountability. A man seated a few rows ahead turned around slowly. He hesitated, then spoke. "I just want to say," he said to Nia, "I'm sorry no one stepped in sooner." Nia met his eyes. She didn't smile, but she nodded. "Thank you." Another woman added softly, "Your boys handled themselves with a lot of grace." Miles looked down, embarrassed. Malik squeezed his mother's hand. Across the aisle, an older black woman caught Nia's eye and gave her a small nod, the kind that said, "I see you," without words. That mattered. The woman returned from the galley a few minutes later, face flushed, movements sharper. She dropped into her seat, refusing to look at anyone. Nia noticed her hands shaking. The purser followed, standing in the aisle. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said calmly, "thank you for your patience. We are continuing to address a situation involving passenger conduct." The woman scoffed. "Conduct," she muttered, unreal. The purser ignored her and turned to Nia. "Ma'am, we'll need a formal statement from you." "Of course," Nia replied. The woman's head snapped toward her. "You're really going to do this?" Nia looked at her evenly. "I already am." The woman leaned back, crossing her arms. "You think this ends well for you?" Nia didn't hesitate. "It already has." That was when the woman lost her composure. "You people always want special treatment," she hissed, forgetting or not caring that the cabin could hear her. "Always playing victim while the rest of us suffer." Nia stood. Not in anger. Uncertainty. My children were touched, she said clearly. That is not suffering, that is accountability. The purser raised a hand. Ma'am, that language is unacceptable. The woman laughed bitterly. So now I'm the villain. No, Nia said softly. You're just not the center anymore. Silence followed. Heavy, unavoidable. And for the first time since this began, the woman looked truly cornered, not by Nia's volume, but by the truth standing calmly in front of her. The flight was still grounded, and the story was only beginning. Time slowed in a way that made every second feel deliberate. The plane was still at the gate, engines silent, doors closed, suspended between departure and consequence. Nia felt the weight of it settle across the cabin like a held breath. This wasn't just a delay anymore. It was a reckoning unfolding in real time. The purser pulled a small notepad from his jacket. Ms. Carter, he said respectfully, I'll need you to walk me through what happened from your perspective. Nia nodded. She didn't rush. She didn't dramatize. She told the truth. She described the looks, the comments, the accusation, the hand on her son's wrist. She spoke with precision, not emotion, the way someone speaks when they understands that facts, clearly stated, can be more powerful than outrage. As she spoke, Malik leaned against her hip, eyes closed, listening. Miles watched the purser closely, studying his reactions the way children do when they're trying to decide if an adult can be trusted. Across the aisle, the woman shook her head repeatedly, whispering under her breath. That's not how it happened. She's exaggerating. This is unbelievable. The purser paused his writing and looked directly at her. Ma'am, he said evenly, you'll have an opportunity to respond. Please stop interrupting. Her mouth fell open slightly. She wasn't used to that. Nia noticed the shift ripple outward. A few passengers straightened. Someone in the back murmured approval. The authority in the room was finally moving in the right direction, not aggressively, but decisively. When Nia finished, the purser thanked her and turned to the woman. Your turn, he said. The woman launched in immediately. She spoke fast, defensive. Her words tripped over each other as she tried to recast herself as the wronged party. She claimed fear, claimed confusion, claimed the child had lunged toward her, claimed she had only reacted instinctively. As she spoke, Nia watched her carefully, not with anger but with curiosity. There was something unraveling now. Not just a story, but an identity built on never being questioned. The purser listened, nodding occasionally, writing steadily. And you admit to making physical contact? He asked finally. The woman hesitated. I touched his arm briefly to get his attention. To restrain him, the purser clarified. Well, ma'am, he said, touching another passenger's child without consent is a serious violation. Her face reddened. You're making this sound criminal. I'm stating policy, he replied. A flight attendant approached quietly, handing the purser a tablet. He glanced at it, then nodded. We've also reviewed initial witness statements, he said. The woman stiffened. Witnesses. Yes, he said, several. Her eyes darted around the cabin now, searching faces she had ignored earlier. Faces that were no longer looking away. A man a few rows up met her gaze without flinching. The older black woman across the aisle folded her hands calmly. Even the flight attendant who had first hesitated now stood straighter, steadier. The woman laughed nervously. So what, you're all against me now? No, the purser said. We're all accountable. That word landed hard. The woman slumped back into her seat, arms crossed tightly, lips pressed thin. Nia felt Malik stir beside her. Mom, he whispered, are we in trouble still? She kissed the top of his head gently. No, baby. Miles leaned in. Why is she so mad? Nia considered the question carefully. Because some people get angry when the rules finally apply to them. The purser cleared his throat. Ms. Carter, he said, based on what we've gathered so far, this incident will require further review once we land. The woman scoffed. You're going to believe her over me. The purser met her stare calmly. I'm going to believe evidence. Silence followed. Then something unexpected happened. A flight attendant, the same one who had earlier asked Nia to calm down, stepped forward. I'd like to add something, she said, voice steady but earnest. The purser nodded. Go ahead. I was nearby when the passenger stood up, she said, glancing briefly at the woman. The children were seated and quiet. There was no disturbance before the confrontation. The woman snapped her head toward her. You didn't say that earlier. The attendant swallowed. I should have. The honesty landed heavier than any accusation. Nia felt a tightness in her chest loosen slightly, not because it erased what happened, but because accountability was spreading, quietly, honestly. The purser made another note. Thank you. The woman leaned forward now, voice low and sharp. This is ridiculous. I want to speak to the captain. You already are, the purser replied, indirectly. Her breath hitched. What does that mean? It means, he said, the captain has been briefed, and given the seriousness of the allegation, this flight will not depart until a decision is made. How long? She demanded. As long as it takes, he replied. The words settled like finality. The woman laughed again, but this time it sounded brittle. So you're punishing everyone because of this? No, Nia said calmly. Your actions caused a delay. That's how responsibility works. The woman turned on her. You think you're so righteous. Nia held her gaze. I think my children deserve safety. Nothing more, nothing less. The purser addressed the cabin briefly, thanking passengers for their patience again. There were no groans this time, no complaints, just quiet acceptance. Minutes passed, then more. Malik fell asleep against Nia's side, exhaustion finally overtaking adrenaline. Miles rested his head on her shoulder, eyes still open, watching everything. Nia stared straight ahead, hands resting protectively around her sons. She didn't know exactly how this would end. But she knew this much: the narrative had shifted. No longer was this about discomfort or convenience. It was about truth holding its ground. And the higher the altitude they were meant to reach, the more important it became that justice happened before takeoff. The plane remained grounded. And the woman across the aisle finally understood something she had never expected to learn in first class. Power doesn't come from where you sit. It comes from what you can no longer deny. The captain arrived quietly. There was no announcement, no dramatic entrance, just a uniformed figure stepping into first class with calm authority, eyes scanning the cabin the way pilots do when turbulence isn't in the air, but among people. Everything stilled. The woman straightened instantly, smoothing her clothes, lifting her chin as if posture alone could restore control. She looked relieved, almost smug, like reinforcements had arrived. Nia noticed. She also noticed how her sons instinctively pressed closer to her. The captain spoke to the purser first, listening intently, nodding occasionally, asking short, precise questions. The purser handed over notes, witness statements, and the tablet. The captain read slowly. No rush, no assumptions. That unsettled the woman more than confrontation ever could. Finally, the captain turned toward them. Ms. Carter, he said respectfully, may I speak with you? Yes, Nia replied, rising smoothly. The woman scoffed under her breath. Of course. The captain gestured for both women to remain where they were. No private corners, no controlled narratives. This concerns the entire cabin, he said evenly. That was the first crack. The captain addressed Nia first. I've reviewed the reports and statements. Before we proceed, I want to hear directly from you, briefly. Nia nodded. She didn't embellish, she didn't soften. She described what happened, the looks, the accusation, the hand on her son's wrist. She spoke clearly, deliberately, as if every word mattered because it did. My son froze, she said calmly. Not because he was guilty, because he was scared. The captain's jaw tightened slightly. She finished with one sentence. I am not asking for special treatment, she said. I'm asking for the same protection any child deserves. The captain nodded once. Then he turned to the woman. Ma'am, he said, your account differs significantly. The woman folded her arms, because hers isn't accurate. The captain raised an eyebrow. Multiple witnesses corroborate her version. That doesn't mean they're right, she snapped. People exaggerate. The captain held her gaze. Do you deny making physical contact with the child? She hesitated, just a fraction too long. I touched his arm, she said, briefly. To restrain him, the captain asked. He was invading my space. The captain paused. He is 8. Silence followed. The woman laughed nervously. Age doesn't excuse behavior. No, the captain replied, but it does define responsibility. The cabin felt tight now, like everyone was leaning inward without moving. The captain continued. Our policy is clear. Physical contact with another passenger, especially a minor, without consent is unacceptable. So what? The woman snapped. You're going to kick me off. The bluntness surprised even her. The captain didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked, do you feel remorse for your actions? The question hung in the air. The woman looked around again at the faces watching, listening, waiting. Her voice came sharper now, defensive. I feel targeted, she said. I feel like I'm being punished for speaking up. The captain nodded slowly. Thank you for your honesty. Then he turned back to Nia. Ms. Carter, he said, I want you to know something. Nia met his eyes. Your restraint prevented this situation from becoming far worse, he continued. Your children's behavior was exemplary, and the actions taken against them were unacceptable. Miles exhaled audibly. Malik stirred in his sleep. The woman stiffened. So you're taking her side. The captain corrected her gently. I'm taking the side of policy, evidence, and safety. He straightened. Given the seriousness of the violation, the decision is as follows. Every breath in first class seemed to pause. This passenger, he said, nodding toward the woman, will not be continuing on this flight. The words landed like gravity. What? She shouted. You can't be serious. I am, the captain replied calmly. This is discrimination, she yelled. You're siding with them because you're afraid of backlash. The captain didn't flinch. No, he said, I'm enforcing consequences. The woman's composure shattered. This is outrageous, she screamed. Do you know who I am? Nia didn't look at her. The captain replied evenly. At this moment, you are a passenger who violated our conduct policy. The woman's voice cracked. You're grounding the flight because of them. No, the captain said firmly. Your behavior grounded this flight. That was it. The truth, simple, undeniable, echoed through the cabin. Flight attendant stepped forward, calm, professional, final. The woman grabbed her bag angrily. This isn't over. Nia finally spoke. It is for my children, she said quietly. The woman stopped, eyes blazing. You think you won. Nia met her gaze for the last time. I think accountability finally showed up. Security arrived at the door. The woman was escorted off, still shouting, still protesting, still unable to accept that her power had limits. As the door closed behind her, the cabin exhaled. No applause, no cheers. Just relief. The captain turned back to Nia and her sons. I apologize, he said sincerely, for what your family experienced on this flight. Nia nodded. Thank you for doing the right thing. He addressed the cabin briefly, explaining the delay would be resolved shortly. As he left, something remarkable happened. Passengers began to speak, not loudly, not performatively, but honestly. I'm sorry you went through that, someone said. You handled that with incredible strength, said another. The older black woman across the aisle leaned over and whispered, You taught them something today. Nia looked down at her sons. Malik woke slowly, blinking. Mom, did she leave? Yes, Nia said softly. Miles asked, Are we safe now? Nia wrapped her arms around them. Yes, she said, we are. Outside, the gate crew disconnected. Inside, something else had connected, dignity, truth, consequence. The engines hadn't started yet. But justice already had. The cabin felt lighter after the door closed. Not because something dramatic had ended, but because something heavy had been removed. Nia noticed it in the smallest details. The way Malik's shoulders finally relaxed. The way Miles leaned fully into her side without trying to look strong anymore. The way people started breathing normally again, like they hadn't realized how tense they'd been until the tension disappeared. The plane was still at the gate, but the atmosphere had changed completely. A flight attendant returned with fresh water for the boys. kneeling slightly as she handed the cups to them. Her voice was gentle now, intentional. "I'm sorry that happened to you," she said quietly. "Both of you." Malik nodded shyly. Miles whispered a soft thank you. Nia watched closely, not to judge but to understand. Apologies didn't erase harm, but they mattered when they were real. This one seemed to be. "Thank you for saying that," Nia replied. The attendant hesitated. "If there's anything you need, anything at all, please let me know." Nia nodded once. "I will." As the attendant walked away, Miles looked up. "Mom," she said, "sorry." "Yes," Nia said, "she did." "Does that mean she learned?" Malik asked. Nia paused. She had learned not to offer false certainty to her children. "It means she took responsibility," she said carefully. "Learning comes after that." The captain returned briefly, updating the cabin that boarding would resume shortly and thanking everyone for their patience. There were no complaints, no groans, just quiet acceptance. People understood now. This delay wasn't an inconvenience. It was a correction. As preparations resumed, passengers began to interact differently with Nia and her sons. Not in an uncomfortable, spotlighted way, but in a human one. A man leaned over from the row ahead. "I've got kids around their age," he said softly. "You handled that the way I hope I would." Nia offered a small smile. "Thank you." Another passenger passed by, murmuring, "You did the right thing." The older black woman across the aisle caught Nia's eye again. This time she reached over and squeezed her hand briefly. "You protected them without teaching them to hate," she said quietly. "That matters." Nia felt her throat tighten. "That was the goal," she replied. When the plane finally pushed back from the gate, Malik pressed his face to the window, watching the ground move beneath them. "Mom," he said, "is it okay that I was scared?" Nia turned fully toward him. "It's always okay to be scared." Miles looked up, "Even when you're not wrong." "Especially then," Nia said. She took both their hands. "What matters," she continued, "is that you didn't let fear decide who you are." The plane began to taxi. The hum of movement felt symbolic now, not just travel, but progress. Slow, imperfect, but real. As they lifted into the air, Malik's head rested against her shoulder. Miles closed his eyes, exhaustion finally catching up to him. Nia sat still, letting the moment settle. She replayed the events in her mind, not with anger, but with intention, wondering what her sons would remember years from now. She hoped they wouldn't remember the woman's face. She hoped they would remember standing their ground without losing their kindness. Hours later, as the flight leveled out, the purser stopped by once more. "Ms. Carter," he said, "I want to personally apologize for how the situation was initially handled." Nia met his gaze. "Thank you for saying that." He nodded. "We're reviewing our response protocols. What happened to your family should never happen." "I agree," Nia said, "and I appreciate you acknowledging it." He glanced at the boys, sleeping peacefully now. "They're good kids." Nia smiled softly. "They are." When he walked away, Nia rested her head back, eyes closed, finally allowing herself to feel the emotional weight she had been holding back. She hadn't cried on that flight. Not because she didn't want to, but because she had needed to be steady. Now alone in her thoughts, tears gathered quietly at the corners of her eyes. Not of pain, of release. She thought about how many times she had swallowed moments like this in her own childhood. How many times she had been told to be quiet, to not make a fuss, to let things go. She had chosen differently for her sons. And that choice mattered. When they landed hours later, the twins woke just as the plane slowed. "Did we make it?" Miles asked sleepily. "Yes," Nia said, "we did." As they stood to exit, several passengers waited, allowing Nia and her sons to move ahead. No one said anything dramatic. No one needed to. Respect was enough. At the jet bridge, a gate supervisor stood waiting. She addressed Nia directly, voice sincere. "Ms. Carter, we're very sorry for what you experienced today. Your complaint has been documented, and we will be following up." Nia nodded, "Thank you." She took her son's hands and walked forward. As they moved through the terminal, Miles looked around, then up at his mother. "Mom," he asked. "Yes." "Next time, if something like that happens again, will you do the same thing?" Nia stopped walking. She knelt in front of them, right there in the airport, surrounded by strangers and movement. "I will always protect you," she said. "But one day you'll know how to protect yourselves too without becoming what tried to hurt you." Malik wrapped his arms around her neck. "I'm glad you're our mom." Nia held him close, blinking back tears. "I'm glad I'm yours," she whispered. They walked on together, not untouched by what happened but strengthened by it. The world hadn't changed completely, but something had shifted. And for Nia and her sons, that was enough. The cabin felt lighter after the door closed. Not because something dramatic had ended, but because something heavy had been removed. Nia noticed it in the smallest details. The way Malik's shoulders finally relaxed. The way Miles leaned fully into her side without trying to look strong anymore. The way people started breathing normally again, like they hadn't realized how tense they'd been until the tension disappeared. The plane was still at the gate, but the atmosphere had changed completely. A flight attendant returned with fresh water for the boys, kneeling slightly as she handed the cups to them. Her voice was gentle now, intentional. "I'm sorry that happened to you," she said quietly. "Both of you." Malik nodded shyly. Miles whispered a soft thank you. Nia watched closely, not to judge but to understand. Apologies didn't erase harm, but they mattered when they were real. This one seemed to be. "Thank you for saying that," Nia replied. The attendant hesitated. "If there's anything you need, anything at all, please let me know." Nia nodded once. "I will." As the attendant walked away, Miles looked up. "Mom," she said, "sorry." "Yes," Nia said, "she did." "Does that mean she learned?" Malik asked. Nia paused. She had learned not to offer false certainty to her children. "It means she took responsibility," she said carefully. "Learning comes after that." The captain returned briefly, updating the cabin that boarding would resume shortly and thanking everyone for their patience. There were no complaints, no groans, just quiet acceptance. People understood now. This delay wasn't an inconvenience. It was a correction. As preparations resumed, passengers began to interact differently with Nia and her sons. Not in an uncomfortable, spotlighted way, but in a human one. A man leaned over from the row ahead. "I've got kids around their age," he said softly. "You handled that the way I hope I would." Nia offered a small smile. "Thank you." Another passenger passed by, murmuring, "You did the right thing." The older black woman across the aisle caught Nia's eye again. This time she reached over and squeezed her hand briefly. "You protected them without teaching them to hate," she said quietly. "That matters." Nia felt her throat tighten. "That was the goal," she replied. When the plane finally pushed back from the gate, Malik pressed his face to the window, watching the ground move beneath them. "Mom," he said, "is it okay that I was scared?" Nia turned fully toward him. "It's always okay to be scared." Miles looked up, "Even when you're not wrong." "Especially then," Nia said. She took both their hands. "What matters," she continued, "is that you didn't let fear decide who you are." The plane began to taxi. The hum of movement felt symbolic now, not just travel but progress. Slow, imperfect, but real. As they lifted into the air, Malik's head rested against her shoulder. Miles closed his eyes, exhaustion finally catching up to him. Nia sat still, letting the moment settle. She replayed the events in her mind, not with anger but with intention, wondering what her sons would remember years from now. She hoped they wouldn't remember the woman's face. She hoped they would remember standing their ground without losing their kindness. Hours later, as the flight leveled out, the purser stopped by once more. "Ms. Carter," he said, "I want to personally apologize for how the situation was initially handled." Nia met his gaze. "Thank you for saying that." He nodded. "We're reviewing our response protocols. What happened to your family should never happen." "I agree," Nia said, "and I appreciate you acknowledging it." He glanced at the boys, sleeping peacefully now. "They're good kids." Nia smiled softly. "They are." When he walked away, Nia rested her head back, eyes closed, finally allowing herself to feel the emotional weight she had been holding back. She hadn't cried on that flight. Not because she didn't want to, but because she had needed to be steady. Now alone in her thoughts, tears gathered quietly at the corners of her eyes. Not of pain, of release. She thought about how many times she had swallowed moments like this in her own childhood. How many times she had been told to be quiet, to not make a fuss, to let things go. She had chosen differently for her sons. And that choice mattered. When they landed hours later, the twins woke just as the plane slowed. "Did we make it?" Miles asked sleepily. "Yes," Nia said, "we did." As they stood to exit, several passengers waited, allowing Nia and her sons to move ahead. No one said anything dramatic. No one needed to. Respect was enough. At the jet bridge, a gate supervisor stood waiting. She addressed Nia directly, voice sincere. "Ms. Carter, we're very sorry for what you experienced today. Your complaint has been documented, and we will be following up." Nia nodded, "Thank you." She took her son's hands and walked forward. As they moved through the terminal, Miles looked around, then up at his mother. "Mom," he asked. "Yes. Next time, if something like that happens again, will you do the same thing?" Nia stopped walking. She knelt in front of them, right there in the airport, surrounded by strangers and movement. "I will always protect you," she said. "But one day you'll know how to protect yourselves too without becoming what tried to hurt you." Malik wrapped his arms around her neck. "I'm glad you're our mom." Nia held him close, blinking back tears. "I'm glad I'm yours," she whispered. They walked on together, not untouched by what happened but strengthened by it. The world hadn't changed completely, but something had shifted. And for Nia and her sons, that was enough. Some lessons aren't taught in classrooms. They are lived, witnessed, and felt in moments that demand courage and integrity. Nia Carter's story is a reminder that protection, truth, and dignity are not privileges. They are responsibilities. Her sons, Malik and Miles, learned that standing firm doesn't always mean raising your voice. Sometimes, it means being calm, measured, and resolute while others choose chaos. They learned that fear is natural, but fear does not define you. What defines you is how you act when someone tries to take what is yours, not possessions, but safety, respect, and identity. The story also reminds us that accountability has power. Privilege, entitlement, and authority may seem unassailable, but when confronted with truth, justice can rise quietly yet irrevocably. The woman's attempts to intimidate, to assert control, to rewrite reality failed not because Nia sought revenge, but because she demanded what was right. She showed that moral courage doesn't need to shout, it needs to stand. And the broader lesson stretches beyond the walls of first class or any single incident. It is about modeling resilience for the next generation. Nia didn't just protect her children physically. She protected their understanding of fairness, their belief in dignity, and their hope that truth matters. She turned a moment of fear into a lesson of strength for Malik, for Miles, and for everyone watching. If this story touched you, remember, courage isn't always about confrontation. Sometimes it is about calm conviction in the face of injustice. Stand for what is right. Protect those who cannot protect themselves. Speak truth even when it is inconvenient. And never underestimate the quiet power of doing the right thing, because one act of integrity can shift an entire room, a whole plane, or even a generation. Share this story with someone who needs to see that strength isn't loud, justice is relentless, and dignity is priceless. Because the world changes when ordinary people refuse to accept anything less than what is right.